Netherworld security. Walking in the Netherworld felt like walking on a starless night sky. The only source of light besides the purple stars above was a ghostly blue luminescence that shone from beneath our feet and didn't penetrate far into the heavy veil of darkness that surrounded us. The atmosphere reminded me of a funeral home. I felt like speaking was somehow inappropriate. We walked for nearly 20 minutes in total silence before I finally worked up the courage to ask Larry a question. Hey, Larry, I whispered. Yeah, Larry answered in his normal voice. How much farther to go? Larry sighed. What, do you have to pee or something? We'll get there when we get there. I know that, but you must have some idea of how far it is from here. Larry chewed on the end of his cigar and pulled the thingamajig from his pocket, studying the patterns of light that moved within it. It's about 16 netherworld hyperseconds. How long is a netherworld hypersecond? Larry shrugged. No idea, mate. We walked on in silence for a few more minutes before the nervous tension overwhelmed me and I spoke again. Larry? Larry spat on the ground. I bet you're really fun on road trips, he replied. What? Nothing. What do you want, kid? Well, I said, hesitant at the nature of the question I was about to ask. I had a question. Had? Or have? Spit it out already, boy. It's about the sacrifice. Yeah? Well, what about it? I was just wondering, if you get sacrificed, then won't you die? Larry stopped short, and I almost ran into his back. He turned around to look at me. An almost comical expression of disbelief had slackened his features so much that his cigar hung loosely from the corner of his mouth. Won't I what? I looked to Miss Hatchetface for reassurance, but she was staring at me with a similar look on her face. I mean, if you get sacrificed, you die, right? I mean, that's what a sacrifice is. That's what a sacrifice is, Larry repeated blankly. So let me get this straight. You were planning on killing me this whole time? Well, no. I mean, I didn't really, that is your job, right? Larry cocked his head and squinted his eyes, pulling the cigar out of his mouth and poking the unlit end in my chest as he spoke. You think my job is to get murdered? And you just went along without question? What in the hell is wrong with you? Well, I didn't know you were going to be a talking goat at first. I just thought you were going to be a normal one. Larry's face went so red that his white fur looked almost pink. So now you're saying I'm not normal? It's not enough that you want to kill me, but you have to insult me too? No, I just meant that. You just meant that if I couldn't talk, it'd be all right with me. I've got a little nephew who's a deaf mute. You want to kill him too, you Nazi? Miss Hatchetface came to my rescue. Darren doesn't know anything about it. Everybody around him just acted like it was normal, so he assumed it was. It's not his fault. Yeah, totally not his fault. That's the problem with you humans. It's never your fault. You're always just going along with the flow and doing what everybody else does, even if in the end the result is terror, famine, and death. Listen, Larry, I'm really sorry. Yeah, he said, chewing on his cigar. Don't worry about it, kid. It's about what I'd expect. Seriously, Larry, if you... Shut up. Geez, Larry, said Miss Hatchetface. He said he was sorry. No, I mean shut up, whispered Larry. Listen. The four of us stood in silence. Larry's ears twitched slightly as he craned his head slightly to one side. At first, I couldn't hear anything, but as I listened more closely, I could hear a low rumbling beginning to grow in the distance. The temperature of the air began to drop, and the still air of the netherworld shifted and stirred. Soon, it had whipped up to a mighty wind that screamed by our ears in roaring gales. What's going on? I shouted over the wind. I don't know. This shouldn't be happening. A blue light appeared high above us. At first, it was little more than a pinprick, but it grew larger and larger as it rushed towards us, until it bathed the entire surrounding area. Something colossal crashed into the ground in front of us, sending out a shockwave that knocked us on our backs. The blue light faded as the dust settled around the crashed, unidentified object. The only thing that I could work out from the dim light was that it was a huge ball made of metal. Suddenly, it began to emit a whirring racket of clinks and clanks. A piercing blue light appeared as a forked crack that spread until the ball burst like an egg, leaving broken metal pieces strewn across the ground. Standing where the ball had been was a colossal robot, compacted and folded up. The robot began to unfold itself, and once it was finished, it towered over us all by 20 feet at the very least. It would have been a fearsome sight, except that the robot had unfolded itself wrong, and its head was now situated firmly between its legs.
"Netherworld security,"
the robot announced in a gritty mechanical voice.
"You are trespassing on private property. Turn back immediately or face termination."
Larry's cigar was dangling loosely from the corner of his mouth as he stared at the wide-eyed robot. Hold on a second. You know where your head is, right? The robot turned his head left and right.
"What the? Oh, this is embarrassing. Can you just give me a moment to get myself right before I terminate you?"
Go ahead, said Larry. The robot folded and twisted his body in a series of mechanical contortions and hydraulic whirs. The end result was that its head stayed in exactly the same place, but its left leg and arm switched places. It now stood on a tilt.
Oh, for God's sake. If they hadn't made the instructions so complicated. Hold on.
The robot began to reassemble himself yet again, but this time both of his legs fell off and he couldn't reattach them. He finally slumped and gave up.
"I told them not to buy the replacement parts at IKEA."
Are you all right?
"Yes, I'll be fine. Look, I'll make you a deal. Help me get reassembled, and I won't terminate you. Just don't tell anybody."
Larry took a long drag of his cigar. You got a deal, mate. I'll take care of this one, Satan said, striding quickly up to the robot with his briefcase in hand.
"What's in the briefcase?"
Tools, grunted Satan as he climbed up the robot's back. I'm a robotic repair specialist.
Wow, what a lucky coincidence.
Satan set the briefcase down on the robot's shoulders and popped the latches. Yeah, funny how life works sometimes. He reached his arm down into the suitcase and fished out a pair of fuzzy pink earmuffs, which he clamped over the robot's head.
Whoa,
the robot said.
I feel a little funny.
That's because you're a flower, Satan replied. A beautiful yellow flower in a green grassy meadow.
Yes, I'm a pretty little flower.
Satan pulled the earmuffs off and tossed them back in the suitcase before slamming it shut and hopping off the robot. That should do it, he said as he alighted on the ground. What the hell did you do to him? Asked Miss Hatchetface. Satan grinned. Mind control earmuffs. Pretty cool, huh? The robot put his arms up and began swaying back and forth as if he was a flower in the breeze. Yeah, is he gonna be okay? Relax. He's much better at being a flower than a security guard. Now come on, let's go. We've got a little girl to rescue. We set back off in the direction of the office. 5 minutes later, the thingamajig went off in Larry's pocket in a stiff, posh British accent. You have arrived at your destination. We're here? I asked. That's what you have arrived at your destination generally means, replied Larry. But I don't see anything. You will, Larry replied. He tapped out a rhythm on the smooth stone surface of the netherworld with his hoof, and the sound echoed off into the distance. But nothing happened. There was a tense pause, and then we felt it, a faint rumbling beneath our feet. At first, I could only feel the rumbling in the soles of my feet, but then it traveled up my legs and through my spine, ending in my teeth, which began to chatter and clack against each other. Fissures snaked through the ground beneath us, and an unearthly blue light radiated from them. Soon we were standing on a luminescent spiderweb, a smooth stone cracking beneath our feet. The Netherworld office building rose slowly out of the ground like a crowning grave marker. Its ascent began to speed up, until the white lighted windows were a blur of solid gray, and the top had disappeared among the purple stars above. The sheer size of the thing was enough to give me vertigo, and I fell over on my back as the ground continued to shake. I looked to either side, and saw that everyone else had fallen as well. Finally, it stopped, and we all pushed ourselves back up off the ground. I turned to Larry. "So, this is where Ursnock lives?" "He doesn't live, but this is where he works." "So, how do we get in?" "The door would be a good bet." "But I don't see a door." Larry tapped on the side of the building with the same rhythm he tapped on the ground, and a line emerged in the shape of a wide rectangle. The rectangle shone with a blinding white brilliance, and when it faded, it revealed 2 automatic sliding glass doors. "You do now." The doors slid open for us, and we stepped into Ursnock's lair. The Office of Eternal Misery. The doors closed behind us with a mechanical whir, and I saw that the inside of the building was a cold and sterile cubicle-filled office. And sitting in the cubicles were large, troll-like creatures with huge gray guts that spilled out of 2 small shirts, short snub noses and drool dribbling down their chins. Fastened around each one of their ankles was a chain with the other end padlocked around a computer tower. Each one of them leaned forward in their chairs so that their faces were only inches from their screens. An endless display of scrolling charts and spreadsheets, reflecting in each and every one of their dull, lifeless eyes. "Watch out for the office drones," Larry said in a quiet voice full of warning. "Really? It doesn't even seem like they can see us." "No, not them. I mean the killer robotic drones that patrol the office." "Where did the Netherworld get killer drones?" "They bought them from the US government." "Oh, forget about it. Have you got the map?" "Yeah, I've got it right here." I slid the map out of my back pocket and unfolded it, handing it to Larry. He pulled the cigar out of his mouth that traced the path that Annie had sketched out back at the home. "So we're at the Department of Human Resources and Sacrifice, and we need to get to the Office of Eternal Misery. To get there, we'll have to go through the corridor of mortal peril. That's this right here," he said, and tapping on the line with the unlit end of his cigar. "Great, let's go." "Not so fast. First, we need to prepare." "How do we do that?" "Well, the office drones are trained to detect any trace of happiness and exterminate it. So try to think miserable thoughts." I looked around at the endless stretch of troll-filled cubicles. "That shouldn't be too difficult here," I said, our faces perfect pictures of gloom and misery. We began our slow walk towards the corridor of mortal peril. The hall was long and narrow, dimly lit by sparse fixtures of fluorescent light. Killer drones whizzed overhead as we trudged along at a slow pace. At first, the fluorescent lighting and the dreadful ambience of the Netherworld office building was amply sufficient to lower my spirits. But the corridor seemed to stretch on endlessly, and soon happy thoughts began to sneak their way into my mind. "Come on, Darren," I reminded myself, trying to keep the pleasant thoughts at bay. "Everything is terrible. This mission is probably going to fail. Sarah's going to stay in the Netherworld forever, and Ursnock is going to eat your world. Stay miserable. Don't let the good thoughts win out." "Come on, Darren. Just a little bit longer." We turned a corner and the end of the corridor came in sight. As soon as I saw it, a wave of relief washed over me. I had managed to do it after all. I kept the good thoughts out of my head, and soon I'd be seeing Sarah again. What was that sound? Larry tackled me to the ground a moment before an explosion struck where I had just been standing. "You idiot! Quickly, think miserable thoughts!" "I don't have time to think miserable thoughts. I'm gonna die." "Perfect. Keep focusing on that." He grabbed my hand and yanked me to my feet, and the four of us began sprinting toward the end of the corridor. "I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die," I thought as we raced toward salvation. "I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die." We burst through the door into the office of eternal misery and collapsed into a pile as we fell over the threshold. Larry sprung to his feet and slammed the door shut behind us, and I heard the sound of drones crashing into it from the other side. "Larry, we're gonna die." "We're safe now," Larry replied. "You don't have to think miserable thoughts anymore." But when he turned and saw what Miss Hatchetface, Satan, and I were seeing, the cigar fell out of his mouth. "We're gonna die." The Second Apocalypse. The office of eternal misery was a cavernous torchlit hall. The ground was littered with pyramids of skulls, some human and some belonging to creatures whose anatomy defied all logic. At the other end of the office was a desk, a large chunk of rough gray stone the size of a triple-decker bus. And behind the desk sat Ursnock the World Eater. On his right side stood Annie and the secretary we'd met before, and on the other side of him was Frankenteddy. The secretary leaned down to look at her clipboard, and her glasses slipped down her nose. "It has come to Mr. Ursnock's attention that you have trespassed onto Netherworld Incorporated property in order to force him to resume his eternal slumber against his will. As I'm sure you are aware, this is a legally actionable offense." I looked to Annie and then to Frankenteddy. Annie's face was impassive, but Frankenteddy looked miserable. And how exactly did he become aware of this? The secretary pushed her glasses up on her nose with her pencil and gave me a withering look. "His daughter informed us of your plan and of your attempts to recruit her in your treasonous plot against Netherworld Incorporated." I looked to Annie, but she looked at the ground. "Is this true? You sold us out? Why?" Annie looked up and met my eyes. "I didn't have a choice," she said, shaking her head. "They caught us down here, and so I had to make a deal." My stomach sank. "Deal? What deal?" But Annie didn't answer. She just looked down at the ground again. "Annie has agreed to forsake all parental rights to her daughter, Sarah. Sarah will live out her days as the princess of Netherworld Incorporated. In exchange, Annie shall be allowed to return to Earth, and Ursnock will not devour your plane of existence." "Well, that seems like a pretty fair deal, so I'll just be going then," Satan said. "Hold on a second. What about my parental rights? Sarah is more my daughter than Annie's. Don't I get a say in this?" The secretary creased her lips and adopted the expression of someone having to explain something to a very stupid child. "The Netherworld does not recognize the rights of non-Netherworld citizens. By our laws, your parental rights are null and void." "This is unbelievable," protested Miss Hatchetface. "You can't just steal his daughter from him and act like that's okay. Tell them, Larry." Larry tugged at his beard. And what about the goat dimension? Will Ursnock spare that too?" The secretary sighed and scribbled something down on her clipboard. "Fine. Whatever it takes to get the princess of the Netherworld back." "Wait, what do you mean, back?" The secretary rolled her eyes. "I mean," she said, pausing to take a deep, steadying breath, "back from wherever it is you have taken her." "But we came down here to rescue her. If you don't have her, then where is she?" A silence fell over the room as confused faces searched each other for answers. "Oh, I know where she is," said Frankenteddy. "You what? How would you know where she's gone? You're just an oversized toy with a head full of stuffing." "The stuffing is but insulation for a fierce and powerful mind," bellowed Frankenteddy, tapping the side of his head knowingly with an enormously fluffy paw. Actually, we only told you that to make you feel better. It really is just stuffing all the way through, said Satan. Oh. There was an awkward pause before he said, but I still know where Sarah is. Well, get on with it already, said the secretary. Who has taken her? Nobody has taken her. Princess Sarah has escaped of her own volition. The secretary shook her head. That seems awfully unlikely. We have a top-notch security system in the netherworld. Ha, said Miss Hatchetface. The secretary pursed her lips into two thin white lines as Miss Hatchetface turned to Frankenteddy. How did she escape? She is learned and powerful in the ways of magic. She simply opened a portal back to Earth. That's it? We're down here mucking around in the netherworld, and she's been back on Earth this whole time? Why wouldn't she come directly to me? She wanted to stop at Disneyland first. Wait, Sarah was already back on Earth before you came down here? Yes. And you knew about it? Of course, said Frankenteddy. I am Sarah's demonic guardian. I am aware of her location at all times. Why didn't you say anything? Frankenteddy shrugged. You seemed very excited to come to the netherworld. I didn't want to ruin your vacation. Excited? We were terrified. Is that not one of the many varieties of excitement? No, yeah. Just forget about it. Larry was shaking his head. So I came down here with you lunatics for nothing? Fantastic. Does anybody have a portal back home? Hold on a second, said the secretary. What makes you think you're going home? A roar billowed forth from Ursnock, shaking the fabric of reality as it rent the netherworld air. The secretary looked up at what I can only assume was Ursnock's face. You're sure? Fine. Ursnock says you can all go, including you, Annie, but only on the condition that Sarah return to the netherworld and fulfill her responsibilities as princess. Deal, said Satan. She's at Disneyland. Should we go and get her for you? Hold on a second. I didn't agree to... Ursnock says he'll go himself. Clearly, you all can't be trusted to accomplish anything. The air around us began to vibrate and swirl, coming alive with a monstrous cacophony. The ground shook and cracked, and pieces began to break off and float in the air as if unbound by gravity. Ursnock began to twist and distort in a spiral, growing smaller until finally disappearing with a surprisingly subdued pop. So, is there a portal out of here? Larry asked. Yeah, said Annie. I got the portal back to Maymay's open. I'll take you guys back. We resurfaced in the walk-in cooler of Maymay's Chinese buffet, just in time to frighten a waiter who was coming back for a pot of egg drop soup. Satan skipped out of the way as the pot clanged to the floor and spilled its contents, but the rest of us ended up with egg drop shoes. Sorry, Satan said, shoving the kid out of the way and pushing open the door of the refrigerator. But we've got business to handle. We all followed suit, pushing our way out into the kitchen of the restaurant. We found the back door and managed to frighten yet another 2 waiters having a smoke break on our way out. We paused outside the restaurant, next to a dumpster full of questionable-looking spoiled meat, and stared at each other in silence. So, said Annie, I guess this is where I leave you guys. Sorry about your daughter, Darren, but it really is the best thing for everyone involved. The best thing? The best thing would be if you stuck your head up your... Whoa there, Jerry. Better not say anything you're going to regret. Best to just let bygones be bygones. Let bygones be bygones? Shh, said Satan, and turning to me and giving me a wink with his right eye so that Annie couldn't see. Just let it go. I turned back to Annie. Just get out of my sight. I never want to see you again. I'm sorry you feel that way right now. Maybe you'll change your mind. Yeah, right. When pigs fly. Pigs do fly in another world. Just go away. Okay. Annie's image shimmered for a moment like a mirage, and then she disappeared with a small pop just like her father had. I shook my head. Unbelievable, I said. Then, turning back to Satan, I asked, "Hey, Satan, what was that wink about?" "Don't you worry about that, Jerry. I've got a secret plan." "Oh, God, not again," Miss Hatchetface said. "Have you already forgotten how your last plan turned out?" "There was no last plan. It's the same as before. It's still going." "So it was part of your plan to waste our time in the netherworld for no reason?" "It sure was," Satan said, winking at her. Miss Hatchetface scowled at him. "Please don't wink at me." "Does this plan involve me in any way?" asked Larry. "Not anymore." "Good," Larry replied. "I'm going back to the goat dimension. You'll get my bill in the mail. I'll be adding a special idiot tax." "You're going to be calling it a genius tax when my plan plans out," said Satan. "Uh-huh," said Larry, walking off. "I'm sure." "So, what is this secret plan of yours?" "Don't be stupid, Jerry. If I told you, it wouldn't be a secret anymore. Now let's all go to Disneyland. If you want to see the end of my genius plan, then we don't have much time." "Not to be a buzzkill," said Miss Hatchetface, "but by now Ursnock is already there. How are we supposed to get there in time to do anything?" Satan threw his hands out. "I'm the devil, for God's sake. You think I can't get us there in time?" "But last time we drove." "Well, that was a family road trip. It was just for fun." "I had a concussion. How is that supposed to be fun?" "Concussions are plenty fun once you get used to them," Satan replied. A light bulb went on in my head. "Wait a second. Is that why you can never remember my name?" "I don't know what you're talking about, Jerry. Now come on, let's hurry before it's too late." Satan snapped his fingers and a gate of purple flames bounded by ornately carved obsidian pillars sprang up from out of the ground. "Pretty cool, huh?" said Satan, elbowing me in the ribs. "You know I invented these, right?" "No, you didn't," said Miss Hatchetface. "Shush! Jerry doesn't need to know that." Satan patted me on the back. "All right, Jerry. There's a secret to these gates, so just listen up. You've got to close your eyes and concentrate hard on where you're going, or the hellfire will burn you to a crisp." I looked at Satan and said, "You're joking, right?" "Maybe," he replied, and then he shoved me into the gate. The Battle with Ursnock. Traveling to hell and back had been like being sucked through a straw, but somehow this was even worse. I rushed along a giant slide of purple fire. My hands blew up like balloons to the point that my fingers looked like swollen sausages. My left foot grew to the size of a college textbook, and my right one shrank to the size of a mousetrap. A beard sprouted out of my face, turned gray, fell off, and then came back as bright pink. I saw a huge vertical wall approaching, gray and immobile. I realized too late that it was actually a sidewalk and that I was falling. I fell face first onto the ground and my nose began to fountain blood. I pushed myself up to see that Frankenteddy, Satan, and Miss Hatchetface had already arrived. "Geez, what took you so long, Jerry? Did you get lost or something?" I wiped the blood off my nose and rubbed my hands clean on my pants. "Is it broken?" I asked. "Looks like it, but I like it better this way. It gives you a rugged sort of look, like a boxer or a homeless person." I felt gingerly at my nose and a bolt of pain shot through my forehead. "Can you fix it?" "Of course I can." I was actually talking to Miss Hatchetface. "Nonsense," he said, waving me off and seizing my face with both hands. "I have a medical degree." "For humans?" I asked, as Satan poked and prodded my face. "Let's not worry about trivialities." He took a step back and snapped his fingers, and I felt a sensation like being smacked in the face by a frying pan. Oh no, that doesn't look good at all. A feeling of dread bubbled out of my stomach and began to creep up my esophagus. What? What did you do to my nose? See for yourself, said Satan, snapping his fingers and conjuring a mirror out of thin air. I had prepared myself for the worst as he held it up to my face. I don't get it. It looks exactly the same as it did before. Exactly. You're a jerk, Satan. I tossed the mirror and Satan snapped his fingers again, disappearing it before it hit the ground. I like your nose, Miss Hatchetface said. It's distinctive. What a diplomatic way to put it, said Satan. Now come on, we've got to get going. This is my final phase of my plan, and we've got no time to waste. We made our way up to the gates of Disneyland to see that the ticket booth was being worked by Jerry, the giant blue demon with the axe in his head. Hey Jerry, it's good to see you again. He huffed out of his bowl-like nostrils and pointed towards the park. Ursnock is already here. You'd better hurry. I looked to where he was pointing and saw that Ursnock had indeed already arrived. Above him in the sky was a rippling black fissure, with storm clouds pouring out and huge lightning bolts crackling down. I immediately took off in that direction, sprinting through the gates of the park towards Ursnock, hoping that I wasn't too late to save my daughter. I could hear the others at my heels as I closed in. The mighty netherworld beast unleashed a colossal roar and reality shook around us, nearly sending me headlong into the pavement. I passed people fleeing the other way, but as I got closer, I could see there was a crowd gathered around the beast. The mob was composed of demons and human children, all facing Ursnock and swaying back and forth, while chanting something I couldn't make out. Suddenly, I felt myself being yanked back, and my head smacked hard on the pavement as I went down. Ouch, said Satan, looking at me. That looked like it hurt. Sorry about that. What the hell is wrong with you? I sputtered. Lots of things, but that's not important right now. Just like you. What are you talking about? I tried to sit up, but Satan pushed me gently back to the ground with one of his hooves. You're not in this part of the plan. Take a look. I stared off into the distance to see a large group of children gathered around Ursnock holding hands. The mysterious black cabinets of scientific-looking equipment were being emptied out by demons and distributed to the waiting crowd. Oh my God, Miss Hatchetface said. Is that what I think it is? Yep, said Satan, grinning. You're a genius, said Miss Hatchetface. Of course I am. That's why everyone thinks I'm insane. I'm so long-sighted that to everybody else, my actions don't make any sense at all. Can somebody please explain what's going on, and can you please take your hoof off of my chest? Pro tip for you, Jerry. Only ask for one favor at a time. It's the children. They're fighting Ursnock. I shoved Satan's hoof off my chest and he stuck his arms out as he nearly lost his balance. I stood up and rubbed the back of my head and I thought I felt a dent. How's that? They're only kids. But kids are special, don't you see? Netherworld beings feed on hatred, void, and misery, and children are the opposite of that. They are the greatest natural resource of happiness and love in the world, and Disneyland is the perfect conduit for that joy. It's a magical place where imagination is more important than reality, where childhood dreams come true, and all of that love, all of that joy, all that imagination is sapping Ursnock's power away. You see that equipment? I had it specifically made in hell to amplify positive emotions. Ursnock doesn't stand a chance. Satan puffed his chest out in pride as he finished his inspiring, albeit long-winded speech. Wow, that's amazing. Are they chanting something? Yep. It's the theme song from Barney the Purple Dinosaur. Oh, that's fitting, I guess. Ursnock let out another reality-shaking bellow, and the crack in the sky above him widened into a colossal gaping fissure. Lightning bolted out and the wind picked up, whirling around Ursnock and the crowd in a howling maelstrom. Ursnock's head began to distort, stretching upwards into the fissure. Slowly, he was being sucked in. Wow, that is pretty clever, I admitted grudgingly. I thought there was going to be some huge climactic battle or something. I'm more of a guerrilla warfare kind of guy. He gripped my shoulder and turned my attention to Ursnock. This is the best part, where my master plan finally comes to fruition. Ursnock reached up into the sky and seized it with his fist as if it were a tablecloth. He began pulling the fissure closed, and as he did so, the distortion was reversed. Ursnock was regaining his normal shape. Uh-oh, and that's not supposed to happen. So, what are we supposed to do? Asked Miss Hatchetface, her voice tremulous with worry. Satan tugged at his goatee. Well, he said, I guess it's time for me to kick some netherworld ass. With a loud ripping sound, huge leathery wings sprouted from Satan's back. He took a couple steps towards Ursnock, then turned and looked at us. If I die, he said before he left, make sure my ex-wives don't get anything. With that and a great flap of his wings, he kicked off into the sky, soaring towards Ursnock. He whizzed around the great beast's head, hurling balls of fire at him that exploded on impact into thousands of tiny little glowing shards. Ursnock bellowed out a strangled cry of rage and swung at Satan, but his oily, shadow-black fingers closed around air as Satan dove beneath them. He flew down to Ursnock's ankles and whacked one with a giant hammer that he materialized out of thin air. Ursnock stomped. He missed Satan, instead shattering the ground beneath him. Satan went for Ursnock's belly, but this time Ursnock caught him, seizing him in an enormous black fist. He opened his mouth and dangled Satan over it, and inside I saw thousands of rows of churning teeth, spinning and chopping and gnashing with no order or purpose apart from utter and complete destruction. But Satan's attack had worked long enough to distract Ursnock from the fissure in the sky above him. Ursnock's form distorted and grew smaller as he was sucked into the opening like sand poured through a funnel, and with a final, resounding clap of thunder, Ursnock was pulled into the fissure and Satan fell from the sky. The fissure closed up and the gray clouds cleared the bright blue sky as we all ran over to where Satan had fallen. He was laying on the ground, eyes closed and body limp. I nudged him with my foot, but he didn't move. I turned to Miss Hatchetface, whose face was creased with worry. You don't think, I said. I don't know, she replied, a tremble in her voice. I leaned down to check for a pulse. I placed my fingers gingerly on his neck, but I couldn't feel anything. I stared up at Miss Hatchetface and silently shook my head. Oh my God, Miss Hatchetface sniffled, tears gathering at the edges of her eyes. It is most honorable to die in battle, bellowed Frankenteddy. I closed my eyes and sighed. I could never claim to have liked him much, but he didn't deserve to go out like this. Boo! Came a sudden shout that nearly scared me out of my skin. I clapped my hand to my fluttering heart to see Satan pushing himself up into a sitting position and grinning. But you were dead. You didn't have a pulse. Don't be ridiculous. The devil doesn't have a heart. Miss Hatchetface and Frankenteddy were both staring down at Satan and shaking their heads. Next time you do that, said Miss Hatchetface, I'll kill you myself. The devil doesn't fear death. Miss Hatchetface crossed her arms and said, I'll call your mother then. And Satan shot up to his feet and nervously scratched the back of his neck. Oh, no need for drastic measures. It was just a joke. I rubbed my aching head and turned toward the crowd of children. I should go find Sarah. No need. Here she comes right now. I squinted into the distance, but I could see no sign of Sarah. The only thing I could see was a colossal reptilian demon running towards me on 2 stunted legs. Its head was an ugly mass of yellow eyes and thorny spikes, and its dark red skin was wrinkled up like old, cheap leather. At the very top, no, it couldn't be. At the very top was Sarah. The beast approached and lowered its head, and Sarah jumped down next to me. My stomach felt like 1,000,000 happy butterflies were zooming around inside it as I saw my daughter again. "Hi, Dad," she said, grinning. "I missed you." "I missed you too, honey." I picked her up and held her face close to mine before pulling her in tight for the biggest hug of her life. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too." Dad?" "Yes, honey."
"You're squeezing me to death."
"Just a moment more."
"I've really gotta pee, though."
Okay." I let her down.
"So the adventure's over?"
"It looks that way."
"Then what do we do now?"
I pondered for a moment before I turned to Frankenteddy. "Let's let Frankenteddy decide." We all turned to Frankenteddy and stared at him expectantly. He paused for a moment and scratched his head. "I want to ride all the rides," he bellowed. I smiled and said, "Okay." Epilogue. A Satanic Union. 6 months later at a satanic chapel in hell. "Are you sure this is legal?" I asked, fidgeting nervously with my bow tie in the mirror. "Of course it's legal. The laws of hell supersede those of the mortal realm." "I know that. I'm just not sure that the rest of the mortal realm does." I turned to see Frankenteddy, who was draped in a massive tent of furry green fabric that somewhat resembled a suit. "Worry not, Lord Rogers," bellowed Frankenteddy. "I have informed the neighbors." "Yeah, about that. Could you please stop telling people that you're marrying me?" "But I am." "Right, you're performing the ceremony between Miss Hatchetface and me, but the way you say it makes it sound like you and I are getting married." "Exactly. You and I are getting married." "Wait, what?" I said, jerking my bow tie off center. "In satanic marriages, the minister is included in the marriage as well, as the demonic guardian and protector of the marriage against all those who oppose." I pulled the bow tie off and tossed it aside, and turning around and checking my reflection in the mirror. The tuxedo definitely looked better without it. "But I'm not really sure we need that, Frankenteddy. I mean, Satan himself has given the marriage his blessing. Who is gonna oppose?" "I have reason to believe Miss Hatchetface's father does not like you." "Miss Hatchetface has a father?" "Of course she does. How did you not know that? What do you two talk about all the time?" "We, don't really do much talking." I bent down and picked the bow tie up, dusting it off and setting it on the small black table beside me. "Of course you do. You're always telling me that you and Miss Hatchetface need to have a private conversation, and then you go into your bedroom and lock the door for hours." I hear noises." "Well, that's, they sound like yelling, but happy." Okay. So let's talk about Miss Hatchetface's father. Who told you that he didn't like me?" "He did. At the annual Hatchetface Family Barbecue." The what? When was this?" "Last week." "Why wasn't I invited?" "I already told you. Her father does not like you, but worry not, Lord Rogers. He is very old. I am sure you can defeat him." "What?" "When you fight." "Why on earth would I fight the father of my bride?" "It is traditional in satanic weddings." I could feel a headache coming on. "This is all too much. I didn't say anything. When Miss Hatchetface wanted to have the wedding performed in hell, I didn't say anything when you wanted to preside. But fighting the bride's father on my wedding day? Why couldn't we have just had the wedding in Virginia?"
"What is a Virginia?" Frankenteddy asked, adjusting his suit to look slightly less horrible.
"It's where I live." Frankenteddy paused in what I can only assume was deep thought.
"I thought you lived in America," he said finally.
"I do, I just... You know what, let's not have this conversation now. Apparently I have to get ready for a fight."
"Yes, and I must prepare for the consummation ritual."
"All right, you go do that." It was only after Frankenteddy had left that I realized what he'd said, but by then it was already too late. The bell of marital torment was ringing. It was time for the ceremony to begin. I stepped out into the satanic chapel and braced myself for confrontation. At any moment, I expected to see a screaming demon the size of a Greyhound bus, leaping out of the crowd with a club and screaming, "Not my daughter!" But instead of a screaming demon, I was greeted by a 4-foot-tall shriveled lizard in a tux, puttering around on a cane and muttering something incoherent about the Jews. Another bell rang, and before I had time to wonder why Frankenteddy's magnified voice was booming out of the speakers placed all around the chapel.
"The bell of paternal homicide has sounded,"
Frankenteddy yelled into the microphone with all of his trademark subtlety.
"Let the battle commence."
The bell of what?" I asked, but my voice was drowned out by the roaring circle of flames that exploded out of the ground around Mr. Hatchetface and me, sealing off all hope of escape. Mr. Hatchetface's milky eyes dotted lazily around the arena as if they were following a drunken fly, before finally settling on me. He squinted and wrinkled his nose, giving his face the appearance of a very ugly raisin with bristly white nose hair. Then, slowly, he raised his cane in a shaky gesture of aggression. "Listen, Mr. Hatchetface," I began, putting my hands up in surrender. "I really don't want to hurt." Oof! The wind was knocked out of me as I was bowled over by something small and round that had shot out of the end of Mr. Hatchetface's cane. I scrambled back to my feet and staggered over to the side of the arena to vomit, but was quickly hit in the back by another one of Mr. Hatchetface's projectiles. The force of it knocked me through the flames, and the world faded to black for a moment, before light exploded in front of my eyes and air rushed into my lungs, and I found myself lying on my back in the center of the arena.
"And the first kill goes to Mr. Hatchetface. Death by incineration. Mr. Rogers will now have to win 2 matches in a row to claim his bride."
And panic shocked me to my feet before Frankenteddy's words sank in. Did I really have to kill this old man twice now in order to get married? I decided I wasn't about to find out, and ducked as another black projectile went whizzing by my head. I charged Mr. Hatchetface at full speed, failing to dodge another projectile that glanced off of my left shoulder, leaving behind a stinging bruise. I was just about to reach him when Mr. Hatchetface slammed the butt of his cane into the ground, sending out a shockwave that knocked my feet from under me. I went tumbling headlong across the dirt, and my forward momentum carried me right into my opponent's knees. The old man toppled backwards, but sprang up with surprising agility. I noticed a moment before he did that. His cane was no longer in his hands, but now lay on the ground between us. I raced towards it as the old man puttered, and just when it was inches from his grasp, I dove into the dirt and snatched it up, knocking him over in the process. This time, his momentum carried him backwards into the flames.
"The second kill is awarded to Mr. Rogers,"
Frankenteddy boomed out through the many speakers hanging high above the arena.
"Another death by incineration. It all comes down to the final battle. What a thrilling match."
Mr. Hatchetface materialized with a spurt of flames in the center of the ring, on his feet and already slowly puttering towards me. "Look, Mr. Hatchetface, I really don't want to hurt you. Just step into the flames and let's end this now." But Mr. Hatchetface refused to stop. He simply kept on trudging towards me with all the certainty of a very old and very ugly avalanche. "I warned you," I said, pointing the cane squarely at his chest. It was then that I realized I didn't know how to fire. My hands groped the sides for a button, but found only smooth black stone. With no other choice before me, I choked up on the cane like a baseball bat and swung it at his head. Inches away from impact, it stopped. Mr. Hatchetface's milky old eyes narrowed for a moment, and then the cane flew out of my hands and into his. "Oh, I didn't know you could do that." In response, Mr. Hatchetface only grunted and swung the cane hard into my shins, knocking me down to my knees and putting me at eye level with him. "You know what?" I said, grimacing with pain. "I'm done with this." I seized the old demon by the waist, lifted him over my head, and tossed him backwards into the ring of flames.
And the final kill goes to Mr. Rogers. Another death by incineration. That was truly a ceremony for the ages. And now, if everyone would please return to their seats, I shall perform the marriage ceremony.
The flames around me dissipated into a rotting, smelling smoke that drifted off into the sky in thin, yellowish wisps, and everybody shuffled from around the ring back to the wooden chairs that Satan's party planner had provided. I caught sight of Mr. Hatchetface on the bride's side, eyeing me with disdain as he trundled back to his seat. Bruised and beaten, I walked down the aisle, and turning around to face the crowd when I got to Frankenteddy. "You fought with honor, Lord Rogers." He clapped one of his enormous paws down on my bruised shoulder. "Thanks, Frankenteddy," I said, wincing. "Everybody quiet down," Frankenteddy bellowed at the already silent crowd. "Let us prepare for the procession of the bride." Everyone turned towards the back of the chapel, and the organist struck up a rousing rendition of "Here Comes the Bride," accompanied by occasional spurts of flame from the organ's pipes. Miss Hatchetface was radiant as she walked down the aisle, long white silken gown flowing behind her, a bouquet of pink lilies clasped tightly in her hands. My heart thumped with anticipation as she neared the podium. She was only 10 feet away, then 5, then all of a sudden she was right next to me and we were grinning at each other like two love-struck teenagers. My face flushed hot and my heart was pounding wildly against my chest, and for the first time since knowing him, I barely even noticed it when Frankenteddy spoke. "Darren Rogers of Earth, do you take Miss Hatchetface to be your lawfully wedded wife, to cherish and to love her for all the days of your pathetically short human life?" "I do." "Miss Hatchetface of Hell, do you take Darren Rogers to be your lawfully wedded husband, to cherish and to love him for all eternity, as the two of you burn in hell together?" "I do," replied Miss Hatchetface, and her skin flushed just a little pinker. "Then by the power vested in me by the Dark Lord Satan, I do hereby pronounce you man and wife. You may now kiss the bride." I took Miss Hatchetface's slender waist in my arms and pulled her close to me. As our lips touched, I began to feel warmth spreading throughout my entire body, and for a brief moment, I was in paradise. Then I noticed that it was actually starting to get hot, and 2 seconds later I realized that I was on fire. Before I had time to panic, I was blasted off the podium by a powerful stream of white foam. Satan was standing over me with a fire extinguisher in his hand. "Sorry about that, Darren. It's traditional to set the couple on fire in satanic marriages. I guess no one told Frankenteddy that he wasn't supposed to do that this time." I pushed myself back up to my feet and tried in vain to clean the white foam from my tux. "It's all right. I'm used to it." I noticed Mr. Hatchetface in the front row with a sardonic grin on his face, but I ignored him. "Are you okay, honey?" my new bride asked, her voice an odd mix of concern and restrained laughter. "Yeah," I said as I stared at her perfect, beautiful face. "I'm absolutely wonderful."